So now we are going to discuss the 1857 revolts, which is very important to be discussed. So revolt of 1857 we will discuss today. Yeah. So simmering the discontent, like there was now we will discuss about some what was the this kind of revolt was there. See, first of Battle of Plassey, then Battle of Buxar was there. So revolt which was product of the collective policy of colonial rule. Okay, so some cumulative effect of British expansion policy, like we can say economic exploitation, administrative innovations, Jamidar, Sepoy, peasant, trade artisans was the simmering discontent burst among the violent storm and periods of 1757 to 1857 was the peaceful, trouble-free. It was also saw the series of sporadic popular outbursts. So religious, political violence, tribal movement, peasant uprising, agrarian riots, civil rebellion, and famine was there. So movement against the local money lenders into the rebellion against the company rule as a money leader had support the policy. British interference to the native religious custom also affected, and the company rule rebellion and uprising occurred for various causes of different region. Like major revolt took place in the south, east, west, northeastern region, and the major cause was cause of revolt like those of earlier uprising emerged like aspects socio-economic, cultural, political, daily existence of Indian population cutting through all sections and classes. And the economic cause was the colonial policy. East India Company destroyed the traditional economic fabric of the society. The peasantry was never really to recover from the disability imposed new highly unpopular revolts. So impoverished, heavy taxation, and peasants resorted to loan from money lenders, the latter often evicting the former from the land on non-payment of debt dues. Moneylender and traders emerged as a new landholder plague in the Indian society. Indebtedness. The British rule meant misery to the artisan and handicraft also. The native rulers who could not now afford the patron of craft workers. British policy was discontent Indian handicrafts, an alternate source of employment that hardly existed as a destruction of the Indian handicrafts was not accomplished by the development of modern industry. The Indian trades and mercantile class deliberately crippled the British, and the British goods into the India was tariff, thus encouraging their entire by British. So the cotton and silk textile from the India came to the end and free trade one way. So refusal to impose the protective duty against the machine-made goods. So Jamidar and traditional landed aristocracy was there, and frequent use of quo warranto administration, and state confiscated suddenly found themselves without a source of income, and it's like ruin of Indian industry, increase the pressure on the agriculture and land, and political cause was East India Company greedy policy, aggrandizement accomplished by the broken pledge and promise resulted in contempt for the company, loss of political prestige, and effective control, subsidiary alliance and doctrine of lips. Right of succession was denied the Hindu prince. The Mughal were humbled when the prince was Fakhruddin death. Now, Dalhousie, Lord Canning announced that next prince on the what will be the collapse of rulers. Well, aristocracy was there, adversely affected the action of Indian society. Administrative cause was the corruption, lower law of courts, and discontent. See, India is a legacy of company rule, also character of British rule imposed a foreign and alien look. Socio-religious curse was the racial overtone and the superiority of complex characteristic the British administration attitude towards the native Indian population and the activity of Christian missionaries. So fear were compounded the government decision to tax mosque and temple lands and making law Religious Disability Act, and the influence of the outside event like coincide with the certain outside events Afghan war, Punjab war, Crimean war, psychological repercussion, discontent among the sepoy was condition of service in the company army, and cantonment increasingly came into conflict. And the to the religious Hindu of the time, crossing the sea means loss of caste. Lord Canning government passed the General Service Enlistment Act, which decreed the all future. So Bengal Army would have to grieve undertaking to serve their service might be required government, and the Indian sepoy was equally unhappy with the emoluments compared to the British. And sepoy dissatisfaction was order of they would be given. So service allowances of Batta, and the Indian sepoy was made to feel a subordinate at the every step, and discrimination against the racial and the matter to promotion of privileges. Discontent of the sepoy was military matters, and sepoy in the peasant in uniform whose consciousness was not divorced. So finally, like a revolt was in Bengal, Vellore, Barakpur, Afghan was mentioned. Okay, so beginning of the spirit of the revolt was what? See now, it's a start of Meerut. So the revolt was started in the Meerut. Like Mangal Pandey went to the step further and fired 34 native infantry. A young sapper was the Mangal Pandey, and he was overpowered and April 8 while his regiment was disbanded in May. But our regiment, which officers met with a similar fate. So and the came to explosion at Meerut. Then third native cavalry refused to accept the grease cartridge. So there was the using the grease cartridge. So that's why imprisonment and put in the fetter like many person has there. So very next day 10 May released their imprisoned comrades killed an officer unfurled the banner of revolt. And now next was the choice of Bahadur Shah as a symbolic head. So Delhi, the local infantry joined them and killed their own European officer, including the Simon Fraser and political agents. So there was charge of magazine Delhi officers resistance, but the overcome the age of overless Bahadur Shah Jafar was proclaimed India. Delhi was soon to become a center of great revolt of Bahadur Shah. Its symbol, this spontaneous rising of last Mughal king to leadership of country was a recognition of fact. And Mughal dynasty became the traditional symbol of the Indian political unity, and the sepoy had transformed mutiny of soldiers into the revolutionary war. An Indian chief would took part in the revolt and to proclaim their loyalty to the Mughal. It also signified that the rebels were politically motivated, and Bahadur Shah, after initial vaccinated, wrote letter to all the chief ruler and Indian urging them to organize a confederacy Indian state to fight the replace British regime. So revolt was spread quickly, and Awadh, Rohilkhand, Dao, Bundelkhand, large part of Bihar and East Punjab shook the British authorities. Civilian joined. The revolt of the Sepoy was accompanied by the rebellion of civil population, and northwest province Awadh their accumulated grievance found immediate expression, and they rose mass to give vent to their opposition. So it widespread participation in revolt by peasantry, artisan, shopkeeper, laborer, jamidar, religious, mendicants, priests, and civil servants, which gave it real strength. And peasants and petty jamidar gave free expression to their grievance, attacking the moneylenders and displaced them from the land, and they took advantage of revolt to destroy the moneylender. So they also attacked the British establishment of court, revenue office, revenue records, and storm center. And leader of revolt was General Bakht Khan, who had led the revolt, Bareilly troops, and brought them Delhi. So now Bahadur Shah was the perhaps the weakest link in the chain of leadership, and his weak personality, old age, lack of leadership quality created political weakness. And Nanashaf was adopted son of last Peshwa Bajirao II. He was reduced to family title of Sahab, expelled the English from the Kanpur. And Begum Hazrat Mahal took over the reign of Lucknow, and rebellion broke out. So Nanashaf was in the Kanpur and General Bakht Khan led the revolt in the Bareilly, and here is where regular administration was organized. Important officers shared equally by the Muslim and Hindu. So Henry Lawrence was here and then Nanashaf was in Kanpur, but there was English in the Kanpur was there and killed the same day, like declared himself to be the governor. Emperor Bahadur Shah and a huge wheeler was in the Kanpur who was suppressing the revolts, and in the General Bakht Shah was in Delhi. So in Delhi there was a Aucham and William who was suppressing the revolt, and in the Begum Hazrat Mahal was in the Lucknow, and there was one sepoy whose name was Henry, and he was wanted to suppress the revolts. And now come to the Khan Bahadur Khan in Bareilly, descended former ruler of Rohilkhand, was placed in command, so not enthusiastic about the pension being granted to by the British. He organized the army soldier and offered the stiff resistance to the British. So Bihar Revolt was led by the Kunwar Singh and the Jamidar of Jagdishpur, an old man in the 70s. Maulvi Ahmadullah of Faizabad was another outstanding leader of the revolt. He was a native of Madras and had moved to the Faizabad and battle against the British troops. Now Rani Lakshmibai, who assumed to leadership of the sepoy at the Jhansi, and Lord Dalhousie, the Governor General, had refused to allow the adopted son of succeed to the throne. And Tatya Tope is a close associate of Nana Sahib. After the close Kanpur, the Rani of Jhansi and Tatya Tope marched towards the Gwalior, and Indian soldiers Scindia, the local ruler, decided to side English and took. Now, there was a sacrifice made by the common masses, immense, innumerable. The name of Shamal, a local villager of Pargana, Barut, Bagpat, Uttar Pradesh, is most notable. He organized the headsmen, peasants, 84 villagers, and marching at night from village to village, using people to rebel against the British hegemony, and the people attacked the government buildings and destroyed the bridge, river, and dug up metal roads, and partially to stop government forces coming into the area, and partially because of bridge of roads were viewed. Symbol of British rule was Shamal sent the supply to the mutineers. Delhi prevented all official communication and between the British and Meerut. He made his headquarters at the Meerut. So now, suppression of revolts. Revolt finally suppressed. The British captured the Delhi after prolonged and bitter fighting of John Nicholson, and leader of Sage, was badly wounded and later succumbed to his injuries. So Bahadur Shah was taken prisoner, and the royal prince were captured and butchered on the spot, publicly shot point blank range by Lieutenant Hudson, and the emperor was exiled to Rangoon. So thus the great house Mughal was finally completely extinguished, terrible wrecked. So one of the by one all the great leader of the revolt fell. Military operation for the recapture of Kanpur, closely associated recovery of Lucknow. Colin Campbell was in the Kanpur and Nana Shah defeated in Kanpur, and his close associate Tatya Tope was escaped into the jungle of central India. Rani of Jhansi had died on the battlefield, and Jhansi was recaptured by Sir Hugh Ross. Kuwar Singh Bakht Khan was Bahadur Khan Bareilly Rao Sahib. So Maulvi Ahmadullah were dead, while the Begum of Awadh was compelled to hide the Nepal at the Banaras. A rebellion had been organized which was mercilessly suppressed by Colonel who put to the death all the suspected rebellion and disorderly sepoy. So British authority over India was fully re-established, and the British government had to pay an immense supply of the main money and arm. Why the revolt failed, all India participation was absent. So limited territorial split was one of the factors. There was no all India volunteer about the revolt. Eastern, southern, western part of the India remained more or less affected, and this probably because of the early uprising. All classes did not join. Big Jamidar acted as a breakwater to storm, and our Talukdar backed above other ones promised to lend restitution. Moneylender merchants suffered the mutiny badly, and anywhere saw the class interest better protected than the British patronage. Supportive feudal order of traditional conservative force of modernity, and these people had high hopes of British would usher in the era of modernization. Most Indian rulers refused to join and gave active help to the British. Rulers who did not participate include the Sindhia of Gwalior, Holkar, Indore, ruler of Patiala, Sindh, Sikh and Maharaja of Kashmir. Poor arms and equipment. Indian soldier was poorly equipped and fighting generally with sword and very few guns and musket. On the other hand, the European soldier were equipped with the latest weapon. Enfield rifle, electrical telegraph, and commander in chief inform about the movement of strategy. Uncoordinated, purely organized. The revolt was purely organized with no coordination of central leadership. The principal rebel Nanashaf, Tatya Tope, Kuwar Singh, Lakshmi Bai were no match to their British opponent in generalship. On the other hand, the East India Company was fortunate in having the service of man exceptional ability. Lawrence brother Nicholas James Outram and Henry Havoc. No unified ideology. The material lacked the clear understanding of colonial rule and program and ideology, political perspective, societal alternatives. The lack of unity in the Indians perhaps unavoidable at the stage and modern nationalization unknown in India, so played an important role in bringing the Indian people together and imparting them consciousness belonging to one country. So the entire revolt, there was a complete cooperation between Hindu and Muslims. Soldier leaders all rebelled, acknowledged Bahadur Shah Jafar and Muslim as emperor. First impulse of the Hindus appoints Meerut. So the Mughal imperial capital, according to the Maulana Azad, two facts stand off clearly in the midst of tangled story rising 1857. So Muslim of India's period, the other is the deep loyalty which the people felt of Mughal crown. Rebel of Sepoy, both Hindu, Muslim and immediate banning of cow slaughter was a once revolt in the unsuccessful particular area. Both Hindu Muslim were well represented in the leadership, and Nana Sahib Ajimullah, Muslim and expert in the political propaganda, while the Lakshmi Gai sought to the support Afghan revolt. So it's for to demonstrate that people and politics of India was not basically communal. The nature of revolt view differ from the nature of revolt. It was mass sepoy mutiny to some British historian, a wholly unpatriotic and selfish sepoy mutiny. No native leadership, no popular support. Sir John Seeley, however, this is not a complete picture of events of revolt. Many sections so Datta considered revolt in the main military outbreak which was taken advantage of certain discontented princes and landlords whose interest has been affected by new political order, and the mentioned factor gave popular uprising. It was never all India in character but was localized and poorly organized. Further say that the movement was marked by the absence of cohesion and it was beginning of the 20th century. So revolt came to be interpreted planned world national independence by V.D. Savarkar. The Indian War of Independence was called revolt, the first war of independence. He said Indians saw national uprising as insane about the 1857 considered the revolt having both fight for religious but ending war independence. D.C. R.C. Majumdar considered neither the first nor the national nor the war of independence, and large part of country remained unaffected. According to the some Marxist leaders, 1857 struggle was soldier, peasant, democratic combined against foreign power. This view can be questioned in light of fact that leader of revolt themselves came from feudal background. Jawaharlal Nehru considered revolt as a essentially feudal uprising. Aman Roy said feudalistic in nature, RP does signify revolt of peasantry against and domination, even acknowledged the defense of old feudal order. Revolt of 1857 easy to categorize, while the easy like LER Rees Woos considered it is the war of fanatic relationships. T.R. Holmes Woo saw its conflict between the civilian and barbarism and nationalism, anti-imperialism concept of common nationality and nationalhood, doubtful accepted community that participated in the revolts. So 1857 stand firmly historian not of course was direct conduct of social forces, and it was on the uprising issue of which socially moving into the early stage of modernization. First war of independence, it certainly was whole canvas recorded history of India, and here there was never a war in India lasting, and it's difficult to avoid the conclusion that so-called first national war of independence, neither a first nor national nor war of independence, and it is admitted that India was not yet political as nation. In fact, the Hindu and Muslim cooperated, but leader and follower of the two community moved by personal loyalty. Now, what is the view? So Now we will come at the White Mutiny was there. Okay, now we will consequences of the revolt. So 1857 marked a turning point in the history. Even before the revolt could suppress fully, the British Parliament passed the Act for the Better Government of India, declared Queen Victoria sovereign of British India, provided for a appointment of Secretary of the State of India and direct responsibility for the administration of the country, and the assumption of the government of India by the sovereign of Great Britain was announced. Lord Canning Darbar at Allahabad. Queen Proclamation is the acquired the additional title of Viceroy. Now, as per the Queen Proclamation, the era of annexation and expansion ended, and the British promised to respect the dignity rights of the native princes. The Indian states were henceforth recognized the paramountcy of British Crown and were treated as a part of the single charge. People of India was promised freedom of religion and no interference from the British officials. And proclamation also proclaimed equal, impartial, protective under the law to all Indian, and beside equal opportunities, service irrespective of race, creed. It was the also promised that old Indian rights, custom, practice would be given regards to framing administrative law. The army was forefront of outbreak and reorganized the British military policy and division of counterpoise. So British could no longer depend on Indian loyalty. So the number of Indian soldiers drastically reduced, even the number of European soldiers increased. So concept of divide and rule was adopted with separate union and created a basis of caste, community, religion. So there was a martial race of Punjab, Nepal, Northwest, and army amalgamation scheme moved the company European troops to the service of crown. Further, European troops in India were constantly revamped. England, sometimes termed as the linked battalion scheme, all India artillery units and were made they function. All higher posts in the army and artillery department were reserved for the European. Until that decade, 20th century, no Indian was taught fit to the deserve for the King's Commission. A new English recruit was considered superior to an India officer holding the Viceroy Commission. So the early reformist zeal of the self-confidence of Victoria. So there was a policy of divide and rule started in on by the revolt of 1507. An autocratic rule of British and counterproductive role of British was there. Now, White Mutiny. In the wake of transfer of power from the British East India Company, the British Crown, a selection of European forces employed under the company, and resented the move that required the three presidency army to transfer their allegiance from the dysfunction company to the Queen. As a British army, this resentment resulted into the White Mutiny. Like there were two separate military forces in India operating under the British rule. One was the Queen Army and second was the unit of the East India Company. And the company troops then received the batta, but extra allowances were paid to the cover various expenditure related to the operation of area then home territory. The transfer of power, the batta was stopped, and Lord Canning legalized the interpretation of the law surrounding the transfer. Also infuriated the affected white soldiers. So, White Mutiny was seen the potential threat to the already precarious British position in the India, with the potential of the renewed rebellion among the population of India, and the demands was European force included the enlistment bonus for the choice of release from the obligation, and finally the demand for the free and clear release with the passage home accepted and men opted return to home. So now it's against another, like this was a white mutiny, and according with the Queen Proclamation, the Indian Civil Service Act was passed, which was to give the impression that under the Queen all were equal irrespective of race and creed. And conduct of the civil service examination was effect of keeping the higher service a close preserve. Racial hatred and suspension between the Indian and the English was probably worst legacy of revolts. So, justifying the philosophy of the white man burden, this widened the gulf between the rulers and ruled. So, significance of revolt was British. The revolt was proved useful in that showed the glaring shortcoming in the company administration and ratifying the promptly. So, Indian revolt has a major influence, like open the grievance for the people of Sepoy while were seen to genuine. Obvious that primitive arms like the senseless atrocity committed by the both sides shocked the Indian intellectual, who were increasingly that violence was a struggle for freedom. So, educated middle class growing section believed no violence and preferred orderly approach. So, revolt was to establish the local tradition of resistance to British rule, which were to be the help in the course of the national struggle. Now, next is Delhi. General Bakht Khan, Kanpur, Nana Sahab, Lucknow was Begum Hazrat Mahal, Bareilly was Khan Bahadur Khan, Bihar was Kuwar Singh, Faizabad Maulvi Ahmedullah, Jhansi was Rani Lakshmibai, and Bagpat was Shamal. So the revolt was economic cause heavy taxation, new revenue settlement, and discrimination, tariff policy, destruction of traditional handicraft, absence of industrialization, political cause greedy policy of aggrandization, absence of sovereign character of British, and military cause were discontent among the sepoy. Economic, psychological, and religious reason was also there. Lucknow was Henry Lawrence, Delhi was Lieutenant Willoughby, Nicholas Hudson, Kanpur was Colin Campbell, Lucknow was the Outram and the Havelock and Colin Campbell, Jhansi was Hughes Ross, and Benares was Neil. Generally, cause for the failure was lack of resources, lack of coordination, lack of coherent ideology, and limited territorial social base. R.C. Majumdar not when organized national revolt. R.C. Majumdar neither first nor neither war and independence. A.V.D. Savarkar War of Independence and Eric Stokes Alliteration character and Lawrence Seeley said Munch Sepoy Mutiny. T.R. Holmes says conflict between the civilization and barbarism and Lawrence and Seeley says Sepoy Mutiny and James Outram says the Mohammedan conspiracy and Partial Spear says three phases of revolt. So conclusion not quite the first war of independence but sowed the seeds of national and quest for the freedom from the alien rule. So Crown took over and company rule, abolished the Queen proclamation and army reorganized racial hatred in the White Mutiny. Now movement socio-economic